know, we have a lot of, we have a huge backlog. How do we get DevOps to kind of help us out, tell us where, things are going and how our progress is, how we're making good progress here. So, we're gonna have a lot to cover today. I'm gonna jump into some slides here. It's not gonna be a lot, but I just really want to get everybody at least get acclimated with the system, give you get a higher view of what its capabilities are, and then we're going to jump into some real life demonstration of the tool set, which obviously I'm sure everybody's more waiting for. So I'll try to make this part as fast as I can, and then like I said, I'll jump into a demo. Finally, I just want to thank Gina for putting this together. She's been kind of a linchpin in making sure our events go smoothly. So you might have gotten some emails from her early on, as well as some system emails and reminders about this event. So she did a great job here. So thanks, Gina, for putting it together. All right, so why don't we jump right in? All right, so first, when we're talking about Azure DevOps as being a tool, everybody understands like that's a Microsoft tool. It's a term that they coined. What everybody knows is like TFS, and TFS has been around for at least latter part of last decade, and sorry, we're getting some feedback. And so from TFS standpoint, it's been around since 2008. Started development in 2007. It's yet been now upgraded to Azure DevOps, and Microsoft kind of took that term and to kind of bring into light what everybody's the buzzword that everybody's been hearing, which is DevOps. DevOps is not a new concept, by the way. It's been around for almost a decade now. All went wrong when TFS came around. TFS is a ALM tool, an application lifecycle management tool. It provides the capability to, provide software delivery, be able to track it, understand it, where it's going, its quality of, its deployments, and with the way the team is able to develop the software, make sure that proper bug tracking, work item tracking, be able to build it and release it in some platform, right? We've been doing this for a long time now. Nothing's really changed, but the technology has changed and the tool sets have changed. And now with the introduction to the cloud, that has changed just as much as well. And so, when we look at what its capabilities are, it's, DevOps it's now a methodology. It was born of agile principles. And so
we might want to get our hands dirty. So we're going to end up talking a lot about the why.
And so sorry about that. So with DevOps has been around for almost 10 years now, and it's more of it's a methodology, and it's born on agile principles, which is the idea you're going to iterate through smaller releases. You're going to be bringing in the automation part, which a lot of you are probably here to really understand a little bit more about. But the idea is that if you could build the best automation in the world to deploy your software, but if you're not practicing in a way to iteratively get your system, your services out there or your new features out there faster, more iteratively, and meeting the demands of the business, then you're not really practicing in a DevOps way. And so this is where Azure DevOps comes into play, because what you're going to see today is that it's already out of the box. It already talks Agile, and that's kind of the point. So if you think about it today, as we're demoing through it, what you're doing as an organization, as an IT team or a software team, you think about how you're applying that today and how you're going to bring this tool set into your process, and more so, how can you evangelize, what it's trying to communicate, record, and be able to output for you. So with that said, and one of the last things I want to bring up is, with the introduction of the cloud, is the fact that, as engineers, it gives us the ability to be very flexible and innovate, and which is something that, before with DevOps, when we didn't speak about DevOps, we have these silos, and a lot of you probably work in these organizations right now where you have your software development team that's building software, and then you have your operations team that's doing the infrastructure. doing the setup of your hardware, your server system, your physical system, or even now a virtual system that might be on a vSphere platform or Hyper-V platform, possibly, that is actually on premises and not so much in the cloud, but it is virtualized. But at the end of the day, they're still kind of the holders of the keys, if you will, where you have to go through them to make something happen. And I'm not saying that they're as a group, they're very important. They have a very niche skill set that they understand, and sometimes, and a lot of times, developers don't understand what they do, and vice versa. So, the whole purpose of this process is bringing the two together as one team, being able to work in a process that can work, make everything more collaborative, bring it together, and be able to, meet the demands of the business by releasing at a much faster rate. So a lot of you right now are witnessing some of this, whether some cases you may not totally realize it, but in a lot of cases we understand and we see it, especially one of the larger organizations, especially the ones that have been around for a very long time. You're hitting like a low deployment frequency. You might be releasing every 6 months, every 4 months, even 1 month. That's pretty good if you're doing 1 month, but you're not really doing it every 2 weeks possibly. Or if you are you hitting production every 2 weeks, right? And so, that's something to think about, how, this process can kind of help you achieve, if it's done right, of course. Remember, this is a tool set. How you use the tool is one thing, how you incorporate business process and change it, that's another. But for the purposes of this tool set, and to achieve a higher lead time and be able to get that release out there with those bug fixes at a more frequent rate, that obviously is much more beneficial, and than waiting 6 months or 4 months. So these are the things that we encounter all the time, and until on, we work with many different companies, small, medium, and large, and we all see their different challenges, if you will. It's very rare that we get a clean slate where an organization is kind of like, hey, how do we do this stuff? And we get to work with them and say, this is how you should do it if you really want to get things done faster. Where we see that a lot is the startups. I mean, we know that they're, from grassroots, they start from the very beginning. They're going to adopt the latest buzz methodologies, the buzz tool sets, bleeding edge technology. That's how you see them iterate so quickly. Netflix is a great example of that. They were born on DevOps. And so, with all these different aspects, it's just something to consider when we're looking at, some of the challenges that we're facing today. So when we talk about like some of the aspects of, what you could achieve with a great DevOps process, and we're not talking about the most high performing ones. These numbers here, to be quite honest, are very average in a lot of cases. What we're talking about is that on the left side, you look at it and you say, well, is it 22% improved quality or 21% in new software and services? That's with regard to like your continuous delivery investment. That CD stands for continuous delivery, and the idea is that you're getting quality out there, more value to the business out there in production at in a faster rate. So you're improving your quality, you're getting more software out there, more services out there, more features for the business in production. Then you look at it from, if you're performing at a high standard of using the DevOps process and the tool set for that matter, you're looking to increase your deployment cycles. And then more importantly, that 200 to 400%, you're probably all looking at that like, wow, that's a very high number. But if you automate your pipeline effectively, from the time that the check-in occurs in the system to the time of deployment, you can achieve that number. So if everybody on the call thinks about like what your build definition looks like if you're in TFS, or if you're in Jenkins and you're building and releasing there, you might even be in GitHub doing these new actions, right? That Microsoft has released, because everybody knows that Microsoft had bought GitHub a couple of years ago. Was a lot of movement there to kind of bring the two systems and synchronize it as far as feature set. And so, either way, I digress, but if you achieve a really good automated build, you bring in your unit tests as part of your build cycle, catch those those issues up front faster. So you're failing faster, you're fixing faster. And then you're getting it out to production faster because you're automating it. And if you have to bring in the cloud into the mix, if you have the ability to, some of us don't have that ability. I understand, but you might be on the lower side of that 200x and the 400x. So that's DevOps. Now let's talk about Azure DevOps. Azure DevOps has 4 pillars that it supports. It brings in the people, the process, and the tools or technology, depending on what you read. You've probably seen both. But it brings up, plan and track is that first capability. It's the planning part of the Azure DevOps or DevOps process, not Azure DevOps, but DevOps process. And like I said, it's out of the box, it's agile already. So, some of you are probably practicing in some form with Agile, and, some of you might be doing it full on, and that's great. And you'll find that, Azure DevOps will support your process. There's some customization. We're going to be talking about that today. I'm going to be demoing that capability. Of course, the build and test. It's been around forever, right? TFS did it. Azure DevOps does it too. It's going to build your code in any kind of language. It's going to test it. You can write unit tests against it. You can write automated tests against it. You get that continuous integration going. So every time somebody commits to into the code, makes changes, the build's going to go, and it's going to test out their changes and do integration, automated integration testing. From there, it's going to deploy to your platform of choice. It could be in the cloud. It could be PaaS or IaaS, infrastructure as a service, platform as a service. It could be on your on-prem as well. You deploy build agents from Azure DevOps that runs in the cloud, have a build agent that runs on-prem that will deploy locally into your environment. So you can still develop an Azure DevOps in the cloud and then to make your production release to on-prem, or do both. Do a production release on-prem as a maybe I don't know, maybe you have a backup in your backup is what's in your corporate network, and you have a cloud production version. The cloud goes down for some reason, maybe you'd go on-prem. Highly unlikely. If anything, it would be the other way around. But the point is that the idea is the flexibility is there, although the use case is unlikely. The point is it's extensible. So Azure DevOps itself is a framework. And you could adopt the Microsoft way and go all the way through. You got the planning and the tracking. You're going to code with it using the new Git repository. You can still use Team Foundation Server version control. That's still an option. You're going to build and test, deploy all the way through into Azure. That's what you see there in the monitor part, which is application insights. And with the operate, you see policy. That's Azure policies. Both of which are incorporate well. And the thing is about it with application insights is, which is something that my friend Ben is going to talk about tomorrow, is, the capability to integrate with it from an on-prem system. So although you might not be deploying to the cloud, you can still leverage application insights at least minimally to ensure that your application is running effectively, whether it be on-prem or in the cloud or both. If you go the other way, which is kind of bring in your own tool chain. And if you do that, then what's going to end up happening is, you could do that, but you could also incorporate your tool chain into Azure DevOps. So if Azure DevOps is the platform, you can incorporate these tools like Trello. You can bring in GitHub. You could have your code in GitHub and still have Azure DevOps build and test it. If you're all about Jenkins, have Jenkins build and test. Use the code. You can have code in Azure DevOps, do Git, and still do build and test through Jenkins. And of course, your infrastructure as code part of it, which is Terraform, Chef. If you're into that. If you want to use Splunk instead of Elk, you could do that for your monitoring capability. And you could bring it all together under one tool chain. So you could use, like I said, using Azure DevOps as the platform. That to me would be the recommendation. After that, bring your own tools. Doesn't matter. So if you break it down, so we talked about the 4 pillars. Now let's talk about the actual modules that it has. And for some of you, you've probably seen this because if you search for Azure DevOps, it breaks it down into all these different capabilities and features. Almost looks like different products. But Azure Boards is something that's actually baked into Azure DevOps, and that's, everybody's familiar with this. By now, a lot of us are probably using some type of board system, whether it be in Jira, Trello, Smartsheet, Azure DevOps, TFS, even Microsoft Project now even has boards in it. So Agile itself is a very common knowledge these days. Everybody tries to adopt it. It's not. We all learn it's a very simple concept to understand, but to adopt it is a whole another story. But at least here, the concept is baked into the tool. The Azure pipelines is that build and release capability. So you have a continuous integration, the continuous delivery into your production environment or QA environment, dev environment, whatever the case may be. And of course, your Azure repos, and that is the code repository. This is where, you're going to store your code. You're going to have Git, you're going to have TFVC, or whatever the case may be. And then the Azure test plans, and the Azure test plans are the ability to write test cases, be able to monitor the automated tests that are ran. In this case, unit tests. Other cases, might be with UI. You could incorporate, your UI platform for testing. And then Azure Artifacts just kind of is that shared library set that you may have. A lot of you probably work across teams or teams that share code across each other. Azure Artifacts brings in that capability by using, such things like NuGet, right? We're all familiar with that. We use NuGet all the time. If you're in Visual Studio and you want to bring in a library of choice, just something simple as .NET Core versus Framework, or some type of logging framework, whatever the case may be, Azure Artifacts brings in that capability too, at the level of bringing that in as part of your build, and being able to build with it, be able to use that shared code. You could do something custom if you have, any framework library in the background that most of your systems use in some form. You want to share it across the board. Azure Artifacts would be a great solution for something like that. But at the end of the day, the reason why it's called Azure Boards, Azure Pipelines, Azure Repos, and so on, is that technically speaking, and you'll see this, is you can incorporate Azure Boards into other frameworks or Azure Pipelines. So like GitHub could use Azure Pipelines, or vice versa. Azure DevOps can use GitHub's new actions to trigger out code and deploy it. So these kind of plug and play aspects, it kind of goes in tandem with or transition from the slide that was before. These are plug and play, but when you use Azure DevOps as a tool, you get all this baked in under one umbrella. So the Azure boards themselves are just that. They're the boards. They use a process flow to understand when something's started, when something's in progress, something is closed. It gives you but it gives you different views. It says, right here on my slide, Scrum ready. And it is, out of the box, it speaks Scrum, it does. But you don't have to adopt that. You can just do Kanban if you wanted to. If you just wanted to have a board that has a flow to the work items, and more importantly, a custom flow, right? Because the whole idea is about adopting Kanban is the idea that you want to adopt a flow that makes sense for your organization. You may not be into the whole new active resolved, which is what's out of the box from Azure DevOps. You may have an active in progress, ready for QA, closed, or something on that lines. You can do whatever custom process you like, and I'm going to demo that later on during this session. Azure repos. Here this is again. You could have many. You have two choices. You start off with Git or Team Foundation Version Control. Git obviously being the most flexible. It is a distributed source control system, which basically means that everybody works independently. You could have your whole repo on your local machine as a copy from the server system. When you're ready to commit or push up to synchronize, that's a whole process in of itself. Where Team Foundation Version Control, right? It's all about having it on the server and being able to, you check in, you check out, but if you don't have that connection back to the server, you're kind of running locally on your own, and you don't really know where there might be merge conflicts until you actually check in. With Git, it's a whole nother story. You have the snapshot of the repo on your local machine, and then you actually could detect merge conflicts early on before your branch is actually merged up into, what they call master and a Git term. So, a lot of different ways of looking at it, and it brings in a lot more power, and you could have multiple repositories now too. Back with TFS, it used to be that you would have one team project with one source control, and that's all you get. But here, you could have multiple teams with multiple repositories. You can mix match the two. It really is extensible to the way you want to work. With Azure pipelines, I think you guys get it. I mean, a lot of you, I think this is probably the highlight of why you're here. And tomorrow's session is going to go really deep into that. But just as a high level, it's very extensible. I mean, it's, it will compile almost any language that you want to code with. If you want to do Python, if you want to do Java, if you want to do C++ or C#, VB.NET, it doesn't matter anymore. If it doesn't have it, you could bring it in. The thing is about these pipelines that they're developed with these underlying tech called tasks. And these tasks can be brought in from the outside. People are creating new tasks all the time. And if it doesn't have it, you can create one of your own to be able to incorporate with your own library of choice to either do a compilation or run a unit test framework that maybe Azure DevOps doesn't support out of the box. So it provides everything you need. And then from a deployment aspect, you could go to AWS. You could go to Azure. You want to go into a Docker container, it'll support that, right? So it could do everything that it needs to do. It has the flexibility to be able to, put together, for you to put together an automation that, again, meets those expectations of a high performing team. Remember when with the earlier slide, when I saw that number about that 200 to 400x increase from the time you commit to the time you release, this is where the action is. So, this is, again, tomorrow's session is going to go really deep into this. And, this is definitely an area I'm sure a lot of you are here for. And with that is the being able to deploy repeatably and reliably. So, when we talk about being able to stand up some of these resources, some of you are deploying to on-prem, and those are, unfortunately, they're structured, right? You have a physical machine, it's configured, and has the proper installation of software, you're ready to go. With the cloud, not so much. You're going to have to, you can stand it up certainly through if you're talking about Azure, you can set up in the Azure portal, preset everything up. You could do that. Or you could do it this way, infrastructure as code. It's this concept of being able to, write files that have configuration that speaks, in the case of like here, first bullet there talks about ARM. You have ARM templates that can be deployed and then stand up these resources automatically as part of your deployment. And then think about how, if your operations team is doing this today, or if they're not, but you're in the cloud, this is a process that really needs to be introduced. So, I would say take notes today, so you understand what this means. Ben is actually going to demo this tomorrow as well. And this is the part where we get a lot of questions of like, God, it would be great if our infrastructure team did stuff like this. They're actually part of the process. They can do these files. They're not hard. You're not really coding much here. The idea is you're setting attributes for the platform to consume, and then it knows how to take that file and then stand up the resource accordingly. It's really cool stuff. And if you incorporate it as part of your pipeline, then now all of a sudden the idea of going through a procurement or going through to a change management or a change control system to be able to say, hey, I need an app service stood up, and you got to wait for that meeting to happen every week. You might be like a week out or 2 weeks out, depending if you missed a meeting or not. I know you've all been there. You got like a change control process, right? And then you miss that meeting, and now you're 2 weeks out to get that app service set up because you have to wait for infrastructure to do it. This kind of takes those barriers down, be able to bring them into the mix. Like, I'm not saying like go rogue and as developers and start standing up resources. Still, but bring your ops team into the mix and actually introduce them into this concept. And be a team as one, to be able to do this deployment type. There's many different tools that it supports. A lot of you are, if you're working in Azure, you're familiar with the ARM templates. Very common concept. Others, Chef is a great tool, very powerful. With the capability, it's more than just configuration. You can actually put in logic, be able to mash up groups of resources. It speaks in terms of like kitchen utensils. I'm not going to get into that, but it's cool stuff. And Terraform is another popular one. We actually get a lot of feedback on that one as a tool of choice to be able to stand up cloud resources. So it's, again, bringing your own tools. If you're doing it today, great. Azure DevOps will work with that. We'll be able to read these infrastructure as code files, and be able to process them accordingly. And then for those of you here that to learn more about like QA or test plans, or just be able to bring it into like your process, because you might be, a lot of you probably find your development teams are kind of light on the testing part of things. It does support some structured aspect of testing, being able to write test plans in the system and be able to track them. The traceability aspect, to understand that a requirement, a user story has been created, and that, yeah, it's great, it's got dev tasks, but what about those QA tasks? What about those plans that should be associated to the requirement, so you understand the coverage that user story, that requirement is getting from a testing standpoint? And that's what this module does. So I'm going to be touching on that today. And I want everybody to take a look at that screen that I see right here, because I won't be able to mimic such good data that this sample gives you. But the idea is that it gives you a dashboard to really understand the amount of coverage that your application is getting for testing. This is the aspect of being able to increase quality, right? That was that 22% at that pillar of being able to increase your quality before your software goes out into production. Or QA. Give the QA team a hard time by making sure you get a good coverage out there. Make them work and try to find the bugs, right? And then here I mentioned the Azure Artifacts. Being able to add, packages of sort to your pipelines, shared packages that necessarily are not, the ones that are out in the wild that we bring in all the time through Visual Studio. It's your packages, your enterprise code that can be shared across team projects and be built as part of the pipeline. Some of you might be working across many different teams, so like I mentioned before, and then you realize there's like shared code. It's like, why are we doing this over and over again? We'll bring it in, and we'll bring it in as part of your pipeline and deploy it as part of your solution as well. And then finally, before we get into the demo, this is a highlight that a lot of people don't know about, which is the lab services. And this is a great offering that Microsoft has. It's part of one of our offerings right now that we're doing. It's called remote engineering. Like in today's world, where we're so remote right now and so far removed, even from not just each other, but from our environments, especially those with the bigger organizations where you need to connect into VPN, and in order to even access the resources that are on your corporate network. It's a whole other paradigm of being able to access these things. And so, lab services provides this ability to set up these dev test environments. And this is that innovate part where I was talking about, where, as developers, as engineers, for some that might be, infrastructure on the call today, as an engineer, whether you're a developer or infrastructure, the idea is you want to be able to innovate. You want to be able to, set these things up quickly, to be able to learn from them, be able to see whether or not they really add value, or tear them down real quick if they don't. The dev test environment provides that capability. And for those, organizations that really are like, oh God, no, I don't want to do that, because if I do that, I'm going to open up to all these different costs that I didn't have before, especially in today's environment where everybody's trying to be cost conscious. That, you still put some level of governance around it. This way, all the teams aren't going ad hoc, setting up whatever they want on a whim. And so, you can use this environment to at least mimic what you have in it, like a staging environment that might be physical, or a production environment that might be physical, and then be able to deploy this application out there, be able to test it in a mirrored environment that's almost exactly like what's on the hard, the physical environment. And that's the power of what this lab service gives you. Because how many times we all know, we've all been there, and probably still there, where you work in an organization where your production environment doesn't match your QA environment or your dev environment, or even the staging environment doesn't match the production environment, right? You have a production environment that might have a load balancer, we have firewall there, so the transmissions are being filtered somehow, load balancer is active, and then you have a staging environment that doesn't have a load balancer or a firewall. Probably even the power of the server is different. And the QA in the QA environments, the environment's even more simple and even less powered, and you're not really getting that real experience. And that's what the lab services gives you, that dynamic capability to stand up these environments and then tear them down after you're done with it, controlling those costs and be able to innovate at a much quicker pace. Okay, so I'm done talking. We're going to get into demos now. We're going to show you kind of the nuts and bolts of what Azure DevOps has to offer. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and switch my screens. Give me 1 second here. Okay. All right. So welcome to Azure DevOps. So a lot of you have probably seen this already. Azure DevOps has been around for a while, so I'm sure you're in one of two places. Either you're still working in Azure DevOps, either on-prem, meaning you have a server that has been around for for a while. You might have been upgraded from TFS and whatnot. The other aspect is that you're might be in Azure DevOps now. You're dabbling with it, so you're trying to learn more about it. Now your organization is trying to adopt it, and trying to figure out how it fits into your organization, the way you process your software delivery. And then some of you just might want to learn a little bit more, or more specifically around one of these features. So I'm going to start from the very beginning, and so I'm going to touch each point as we go through this. And so I'm here in a team project called Contoso Air Booking. And this team project is really just about building a web application that enables those folks to be able to reserve air travel, be able to see itineraries, be able to manage their profiles, whatever else it takes. We all use these types of systems, so you certainly should be familiar with it. To begin, where I clicked into it, I started off with my organization. I have my own organization. That's my name right there. I have multiple team projects going on here. And so I have my Contoso Air Booking. I'll just click into that just to kind of reverse myself here and come back in. When I come into my team project, I see a summary of what's going on. This is not customizable in any way. Everything's read-only. You'll see here I got some deployments going. I got some builds going. I got some commits, some work items completed. I could do it in different, various days, and it'll give me the trend of that, and very static type numbers. But from there is the more interesting, which is the dashboards. And you'll see here coming up, I have my deployment status dashboard. It's pretty cool. It tells me what's going on in dev, that I got a couple of builds here that succeeded, some that released, right all here at the tip of my fingers. I can even click into these, so these are interactive. I'm going to do that in a second. And then I got my trend of my builds and how things are going. This is not just green and red. It's like these are green and red. This shows me how long they're taking and how fast they fail, right? So this is kind of an indicator of, is something going wrong in the case of a fail fast situation. I probably want to take a look at that. Probably it was a code problem opposed to like a unit test problem. So I could click into that as well. And then another view of things is, where are we with the different releases? Basically indicating, this is just dev. But if we were to release in QA, we'd have a QA column here. And then if we did staging, we'd have a staging column. And then if we had a prod, we'd have a prod column. So, that was kind of the meat of what you would be seeing here, which is a really great matrix to understand and be able to see that propagation, where if you saw dev would be green, QA might be red, and, and so on and so forth. I can click into these as well. And then I got my number of commits and then my code coverage number here, which is the amount of quality. So as part of my pipeline, I'm going ahead and I'm including the code coverage aspect, because my unit tests are running through my code, and I'm able to see the type of coverage that I'm getting. This is not interactive, but this is just a number. Ben is going to show tomorrow, how to get and understand what this number means, and be able to diagnose, where the lines of code are not being touched, and where that coverage needs to be. But the idea is that this is a dashboard that I customized. And the idea is that you could bring in other dashboard types. So this is my deployment status. This is my project status. But before I do that, I just want to show like this is all interactive. So I'm going to click in here. I'm going to click into my build, and I'm going to get basically a red error, and I did. And it failed fast because, well, it looks like there was a resource that wasn't part of this deployment. So it just ended it immediately. Going back to my dashboard one more time, you'll see that I'll go to my project status. And the reason why these dashboards are so important, other than they're kind of like animated and cool when they come up and they give you all different aspects, the aspects of your delivery is that for those that are familiar, TFS used to have like SSRS included in it, and it came up with all these canned reports. In Azure DevOps and DevOps Server in the later versions, SSRS doesn't exist anymore. All the reports now are baked into the system, into the tool set. So it's really up to you to bring in the right metrics that you want to see in order to determine your health and quality of your project. So in here, I got my project status, which talks about sprints, right? I mentioned that it's right out of the box, everything's Agile ready. So we have my burn down with regard to my story burned down, and then I have my work burned down, and two different things. And then, more importantly, what's really neat, if you look at this right here, and I'm kind of hovering over it, but I get that overlay. But in here, you'll see that it talks about a project projected completion. So this is a level of forecasting right out of the box. I didn't do anything here. It looks at the average burn of these two, not together these two, but individually. And then basically says, based upon the average burn of the team being a 0.2, which really isn't a lot, it's going to take 41 more days to get done. And then from here, with my sprint, this is my sprint burn down. It's saying I need at least one more day, to get things done. So right out of the box, it's giving me this great information about what I need to understand about how my team is progressing through the work. This is my standard burn down right now. You can see here we didn't do a lot of work, and all of a sudden there was a cliff, and that's for demo reasons, to be quite honest. But and then and I got some bars here to indicate that. And all this is also very interactive. You can see here I can interact with any of these, and being able to understand like what the data points are. Pending pull request. Ben's going to go over that tomorrow. But a pull request, for those that are familiar with Git, is just the idea of doing a code review. It's not really so much an idea, but it should be part of your process. If there is any kind of, from a team standpoint, this would show up a list of all the pull requests that are outstanding. And the idea is you want to be able to go in and get things done. All right, from there, let's go into the wikis. Now, this is kind of important to understand because just like with TFS had SharePoint integrated into it, and you were able to upload your Word documents, Excel documents, PowerPoints, Visios, whatever the case may be. There is no more SharePoint. So they brought in this wiki concept. And it's pretty cool because they brought in a lot of neat type of technology. Like here's a very simple diagram, of course. But yeah, I was able to use the markup language or markdown language that the Azure DevOps has to offer. And I was able to use a Mermaid, which is a technology here to do graphs using Markdown. In this case, I have a deployment process, which is kind of a write-up. And then here with like images, provide some guidance around pull requests for the development team. So, you really can write up all your documentation. I mean, I'm going to do requirements documents necessarily, but at least here to support the project, support your team, be able to communicate, collaborate, have that transfer of knowledge in some sense between team members, all right here in your wiki section of Azure DevOps. And then now we're going to go into kind of the meat of it, which is the boards. So we're going to start off with the backlog first. And I'm going to, from there, just kind of discuss kind of a makeup of a work item. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to kind of walk you through what this looks like. What I have here is a user story, and a user story essentially is a requirement. And for those that are using different templates, for those that are using TFS anyway. I know they might be using CMMI, which would actually be called a requirement. Scrum is considered a product backlog item, and then I'm using the Agile template. And the Agile template is it's a user story, and the user story is a requirement and breaks down into what the description is, the acceptance criteria. I don't have any of these written out. These are demoed from Azure DevOps directly, and then I added my own custom field here. So I'm going to show you how to do that. Because that's kind of key, with regard to, it's great, Azure DevOps gives you a lot of what you need, but there are times when you've got to bring in your own custom field in order to adhere to your process or information that your organization needs to know about with any given requirement. You have your planning aspect or the story points, which is a central part of our demo today. And then, of course, priorities and risks. Over here on this side is deployment. So this requirement was actually deployed. You would actually see this here, and it would show you the environment that it made it to. So if it went to dev, it would show dev, show you which release it went in, QA, staging. You would see the propagation of this requirement all the way through. It's great traceability. And then from a development aspect too, is all the tasks would be assigned here. You can see here that it would include branches and pull requests and commits. Ben's going to show this tomorrow. He's going to be working with some code. He's going to do some builds and releases, and he's going to, we're going to show you what that traceability looks like. One thing I want to show here that here in the tests with related work, you can see the traceability of understanding which tests are associated to this requirement. We're going to go through that later on. But the idea is that, again, you see everything's related to one another, which gives you that great traceability for that to understand what is happening with that requirement. A lot of organizations, they struggle with this. And working in one tool set in Azure DevOps provides that capability to be able to link everything together effectively and be able to see the story, no pun intended, but the story of what the progress of that requirement. Okay, from there, I mentioned that we talked about kind of customization, if you will, of your process. You saw that I added a custom field. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to an area of for my organization. Sorry, clicking around here. Organization settings, and that goes to my process. And for those that used to customize processes in TFS, we all know that it was very mundane. You worked with a lot of XML. You pretty much were free to do whatever you wanted. It was extensible. Don't get me wrong, but it was also a lot of error-prone, techniques, and you're kind of free will to do whatever you needed to do. But now they've kind of wrapped it a little bit better, and so this way you don't, one of the problems with customizing TFS was that with the upgrade path to go from TFS to Azure to, well, not just Azure DevOps, but newer versions of TFS, there was usually a lot of conflicts and you had to resolve them. What they ended up doing now is, it was kind of nice. They kind of wrap it, and they have this concept of inherited process, which is where I'm at right now. So I'm just going to go back there so everybody can see one more time. You see there that I inherited from the Agile template, and I call this Contoso process. From there, I'm going to click on my user story, and you're going to see here, this is that layout concept that we all used to use. Some of us probably used power tools and whatnot. Well, now it's all baked into Azure DevOps, which is kind of nice. It gives you a really nice visual tool to be able to understand what your layout looks like. This is the layout, right? And then from the states, if you don't, let's say, again, you're not into active and resolved, which is what Azure DevOps offers out of the box. I want to see in progress as part of my user story. You'll be able to show that, and then the board will be able to reflect that as well, and then be able to manage these transition states. And so, we see here that I removed active. I can make it show. I can't actually physically delete these because I inherited my process, so they still exist. But this one here in progress, I created this, and I can give it a color coordination to it. And then more importantly, it's this concept of state category. So again, they wrapped it nicely where now these states that you create are hard set to like a category that it understands. This way, when you're manipulating the process, it's not breaking anything. It still has the concept of rules. So when I want to do something very custom, in this case, I want to, set or work item state changes to in progress, meaning something goes from like new to in progress, or maybe closed back into in progress. I'm going to set the resolved reason to something. In this case, I just chose fixed. But I could choose any of these out of the box values that the resolved reason has to offer. And if you don't like these values, well, create your own. Add a new value into the resolved reason that makes sense to you. So you can see here, it's all that capability still there to customize your process. Now, from there, let's go into the board itself. Now that you've seen that I've customized it, I think it's important to understand, well, how does this really adhere to my process and the board? So I'm going to go back to my team project. Click on boards, backlogs. Okay. Now, with the backlog, it comes into three kind of different flavors of views. You got your epics, you got your features, and you have your stories. So in this case, I customize my story. So I'm going to go ahead and come here. Oh, sorry, I got to jump back to boards. This is where I meant to be. So I backtracked here. So I have my user stories here, and I can see features as well, and epics. So you'll see that here. But I customize my story, and this is what I wanted to show here, is that I have my new, I have my in progress, and I have my closed. And so I was able to map my state, the new state I created, and map it to the board. I also have a split here of doing and done. It's kind of an important aspect. You can do this with any of these columns because, as we all know, there are times, especially with developers, they get their job done, their code complete, but there might be still waiting on, let's say, a pull request or code review, whatever you want to call it. So they're doing, and then it goes to done, but it's not closed. So doing would be the act of actually doing the development. Done would be the act of waiting for the code review. And once the code reviews are approved, then the developer would make it closed. In this case, this is obviously a user story. So there's more moving parts here than just a task. But at least here, the user story, if you were trying to do a code review after every user story was done or code complete, you would leave it in the doing. You could make it done. And then from there, it would be marked as closed once the code review was approved. And so you use that in order to map the board to your new state. Use that little gear right on top that I just clicked. I'm going to come back down here at the card level. And from here, let's talk about some of the capabilities that you have. It's pretty, some neat little things here. So I like this one here, the swim lanes. Swim lanes are kind of cool. So, like, when you're working with Kanban a lot, especially when you have that first state. In this case, it's called new. That's what you see behind the window. You might have a lot of user stories in there, and so a lot of user stories also cross maybe different, I don't know, processes or systems. So the idea is what you want to do is you're going to create it, let's say, in different lanes. So I'm going to call this like system A, and then I want to create a new one called system B. And then when I do that, you'll see here that it brings that into the mix now. And so, and at least in the in progress anyway. So now I can actually bring it in and put these into different swim lanes so I could track them accordingly. These can be different components. They can be different, high level features, or maybe speaking about epics outside of like the epic itself. So the capabilities there to customize that, it's pretty. We get a lot of questions about that. Like kind of like manage such a large board when I'm not really looking at the detail level. And going back to my configuration again, I'm going to take my swim lanes out just to clean up what I got going here. And the next one is the highlighting of my criteria. So I don't know if everybody noticed, but if you notice here, I got like some like yellowish kind of cards here, like they're light yellow. If you notice, these are white, these are yellows. And that's because I have a rule baked into my board. I want to see like which stories are big in nature and measurement of that requirement. And so what I'm doing here is I'm going into setting up a criteria of sort where I'll be able to set up a styling rule. And the styling rule is no different than, really just setting up a query. And this is a little buggy, this UI. I'm not sure why it does this. Let me see if there we go. I got a little bit here. You can see it a little bit going on. You can see here they put in a little criteria that just says, hey, look, if the story point is greater than or equal to 8, go ahead and highlight it to this color. That's all I did. So it's pretty cool. Again, just customizing the board in the way you want to see it makes more sense in your eyes as you're looking at a board that has a lot of requirements. From there, let's go into our sprints, and this is kind of probably again a highlight of what a lot of you are here for. So with these sprints, there's the task board. So I showed you the board itself, which is kind of made up of stories and epics and features, which are very the high level requirements of any given system. When you go into about stories, the idea is you're going to be doing a task breakdown, agile process, Scrum anyway. You'll have a task breakout, a planning session, if you will, with your team. They'll create tasks, they'll estimate them accordingly, and they'll go to work. So this is what this board looks like, and this is also customizable as well. So like right now, this is the out of the box capability of a task. It's new, active, and closed. I didn't customize it in any way, but you can. From here, you'll see that they got these bars going with my team. They're indicating what's going on here with my team. I got Ben is ahead of schedule. Ryan's got some capacity. I got some capacity. It's because we did some capacity planning at the beginning of our sprint to understand what our availability is, contribute to this sprint. How many times have we worked on teams where you have an individual that is able to work across multiple projects, and especially with the DevOps situation where you might not need or need an infrastructure person on your team, full time, contributing every day of the week. They might in the beginning, set up the environment, set up the infrastructure as code, but then they'll start to taper off. You may need them maybe just an hour a week, or maybe like maybe 5 hours a week, or the case may be. And you would set their capacity per day accordingly. So at least they're dedicated to the team or contributing to the team in some form. Others might be much higher. So that this is just a number to indicate their capacity per day. This is not your work day. A lot of you probably work 8 hours a day, but the reality is, are you contributing to the project 8 hours a day, every minute of the day? And the answer is no, you're not. I'm going to say probably not. No, you're not. So now this also can mean if you work a 10-hour day and your capacity per day might be 8, because again, it's the direct contribution to the overall project. You'll see here that I included a team day off. In this case, it was Memorial Day that just passed. That falls under our sprint days. And then, none of us have other days off. And why this is important is that you'll see here that I get to track a capacity bar as well as an ideal trend. So let's talk about this sprint burn down real quick. This is not ideal in any way. We didn't do any work up until yesterday, and then the cliff fell. And then from there, we're ready for another burn down. So for demo reasons, just to kind of show, the progress. But these two bars here. So this dotted line is a capacity planning bar. Well, this is the ideal trend. Ideal trend is the, bare bones concept in Scrum that indicates like if the team was to be fully productive every day and contributing at their full capacity, unplanned capacity, then they would be meeting this ideal trend just by knowing like where the baseline was. This here is what I call the more realistic view, which understands your team's ability to contribute, how you set the capacity, and being able to meet those demands to meet the end, basically the sprint goal at the end of the day. The idea is you want to get these two as close as possible. This is actually pretty good. And then obviously they both meet at the end, which is like really fantastic. You'll see here it calculates the average burn down. That's based upon every day the sprint has. And then, of course, the total scope increase. Obviously, you never want this to be a plus number. If it does, that means more work was added to the sprint than what was planned. This needs to be a negative and keep going down, down, down as the burn progresses through the sprint. All right, from there, we're going to go into some feature planning. So if you notice in my sprint I have here that I'm going in my sprint task, my backlog. I have feature timeline and epic roadmap. And the feature timeline is a fairly new feature. And what this indicates is that I'm able to plan at a feature level or an epic level. And I'm able to understand where my sprint schedule lies for any given feature. It's a great visualization. A lot of us, before this, a lot of us used to do this by hand. I know I used to create spreadsheets and actually do this outside of TFS at the time, and it was painstaking. But now I have all my requirements and my backlog is in Azure DevOps, and it gives me this great tool that I'm able to visualize and understand, what's going on, where we are with the progress of these features. I also can see here that I got some stories that don't have story points. It's kind of important. We're going to show why the importance of that is very momentarily. And then I'm able to see kind of, again, where things lie with my overall kind of sprint schedule. It's really fantastic. Completed stories, just another view. This just changed the numbers. It went from 1 to 3. And this is in case the amount of stories that are completed for that given feature. Go back to effort. You'll see here that it's the actual hours that it would take to get this done. And so that's, again, just a different view. You'll notice one thing about Azure DevOps. You have the ability to look at data any way you like. It's really just a matter of how you want to interpret it, how you want to manage your project, how your organization wants to manage itself. Right now, we're working with an organization that is, looking at, combining different frameworks of Agile into their organization, whatever seems fit for the team. Some like it, want to do it more of a Kanban style that keeps it simple. Others would be doing Scrum. It's very common in that case. But at the end of the day, portfolio management or some level of feature management as a product owner, this is a very important kind of look, if you will, to the software delivery of this particular application. I don't have any epics to show you, so I don't have any epics in this particular project. That's because I just didn't create any, but it would have the same kind of look. I'm going to show you a different look to that, and it's called the portfolio plans. And from there, in the portfolio planning, I got my booking application. And you'll see here, it's very similar to what I just showed you. The idea is that, you want to be able to, you could drag these across. So instead of setting the dates yourself inside the work item, you get to drag these accordingly and the dates get set automatically. You can actually see dependencies, but I don't have any dependencies here. This is actually a pretty simple view. But I think you guys get what I'm talking about. Let me show you a different view that actually has more substance behind it. I got this roadmap plan here. This is pretty cool. Actually, this crosses different projects. So the thing about this feature is that although I'm in the Cotoso Air booking, I'm actually looking at other projects that have nothing to do with my team project that I was just in. So you could create different plans across all the team projects in your Azure DevOps organization. And you can see the dependencies between the two. In this case, I have my epics for my healthcare clinic, and I have my patient shuttle application, which I have features. So I can mix match, what I want to track. I could have everything here: my patient, my epics, my features, and whatever I want to do to be able to effectively track it. If I want to see dependencies between other features, I would do is click on it, drill in, and then you would see that here I need my patient information epic to be done before I can even do my patient mobile app, application to get started. You actually see the correlation between the two, that this is kind of nearing its end. This one will begin. This wasn't an automatic thing. I had to set that up in Azure DevOps, the related work items kind of functionality. But it's just a great view, again, to be able to map out, all your team projects, be able to see it from a program level, what's happening. All right, from there, let's go back to the backlog, overall backlog of my project. And you'll see here the 3 user stories that don't have any kind of story point assignment to it. So what we're going to do is, I'm going to have my Ben's in the background, like I mentioned earlier in the session. He's going to help me out here. We're going to be do a planning session real quick. I want to show you what it's like to do a planning session using the estimate feature within Azure DevOps. And in Sprint 4, we have these 3 user stories. They've already been planned out for sprint 4, 1, 2, and 3. All right. I'm going to go ahead and set up my estimate session, and I'm going to go ahead and create the session. So I'm going to call it sprint 3 or sprint 4. We're going to do an offline session. And the difference between the two, between the online and the offline session, is the online session has like a moderator. You know, it's like where I'm the one who created the session. And if the team, if we're doing it online, to collaboratively online, so let's say like a team session like we are today, I would set up online, and then I would go ahead and I would moderate. I would be able to control to say, okay, we're on user story 1, just for argument's sake, user story 1, and everybody go ahead and place your cards as far as what you think the size of this thing is, and then you'll be able to see everybody's card come in, not to be able to see the answer, but everybody would know, see the card come in, and the moderator would call it and say, okay, if everybody place their card down, let's go ahead and reveal, and then you go ahead and flip the cards. In this case, I'm going to do an offline, which basically means that there's no moderator. I could go in and size it up. Ben will go in and size his up, and then we'll able to reveal the cards once everything's done. And the idea is that at some point offline, maybe the next day, let's say in this case we're doing only 3 stories. This happens a lot, right? Business prioritizes new user stories come into play, but they're not sized up, right? So you might have some stragglers that come in. You didn't do, this is after the backlog has been fully sized up. You got some stragglers that come in. You're gonna have to size them up, during planning, or right before, or something along those lines. So from there, I'm going to go ahead and select my team that's going to be involved. I'm going to select sprint 4, and then I'm going to select what I want to do. So some of you are familiar with the t-shirt sizes. It supports that. It's a very simple way to look at it. At Talon and with a lot of our clients, we do Fibonacci. To be honest, is that this is not supported out of the box right away. In other words, the story point field within Azure DevOps is a number. It supports numeric values. So if you want to use story point size, you can either do a translation into the story point, what it would be. So either way, you'd have to translate these into numbers in some form, or you would create your own custom field like I showed you. And you would call t-shirt size, and you could attach it to the user story, and you could size them up that way. The only problem with that is, which I'm going to show you, is that it breaks down when we actually talk about velocity and story point and forecasting and such of those. So I'm going to go select the Fibonacci and create the session. All right. What I'm going to do now is click into my session. All right. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm choosing the first story on here. I'm going to go ahead and place my vote. In this case, I'll just mark it as a 5. I'll go on to my next one. Go on to my next one. Do a 3. Oh, Ben voted on his right down here. So we got Ben coming in. He's doing a vote. Ben already voted on 315. And it was like Ben already voted on 314. So thank you, Ben, for placing your vote. All right, so now the idea is I'm going to go ahead. I know my team is all done, and I'll go ahead and reveal the numbers. And to see here, it comes back and it says 3 and 5. If everybody understands the agile process at this point with regards to planning poker, because that's essentially what we're doing, we would have a discussion as to why there was a discrepancy between why he thinks it's a 5 and I think it's a 3. But for the purpose of today's demo, I'm going to override Ben. I'm going to choose my vote and click save. Or in this case, that's actually I overrode his vote. What I could also do, if I reveal here, I can select the vote. Oh, we got a match here, so that's great. So we'll just choose one of them. And that was automatically set because I chose that card. If I do another reveal, I got an 8 and a 3. I'll go with Ben this time. I'll choose 8. And I'm all set. So what I do here is I go back to, I'm going to leave my session. And I'm going to go back to my backlog. And you'll see here, we went ahead and we set the story points. So it's fully integrated into that field. It set it for me. I'm all ready to go. And then if you remember on my featured timeline, I had the exclamation points because I was missing some user story points. Everything is now cleaned up. So now I'm ready to go. So let's jump right into that. So with your backlog, right, now we're starting to get into talking about story points. And A lot of you are probably measuring up your requirements in some form. That's some type of relative estimation. It really, to make the forecasting come alive, you saw some level of forecasting with regard to the dashboards, with regard to the burn down, which you don't really have control over, right? It's Azure DevOps kind of predicting based upon average burn of those items, where the completion date will be. But in true Agile, when you're talking about story points, it's used as a measure to understand your progress of your team. And so what we want to do here is be able to turn that on and be able to manage and understand where we are within kind of the sprint schedule. In this case, I have a velocity of 26, and you'll see here I got 5 sprints that I think I need. As you can see, we're kind of falling under sprint 3, and this is forecasting it. Now, you're probably looking at this and like, well, hold on, did Azure DevOps just plan things for me as well? Like they're expecting me to do these user stories in sprint 3 and all these are going to be in sprint 2. And it's like, no, and that's not really what it is. All it is doing is putting a line in your backlog to understand, like, based upon the total amount of story points the team is working on for that sprint, where those breakpoints are. That's all it is. It's just totaling it up based upon this number, which is freeform. You can type whatever you want in here. And that's probably another question. It's like, well, why is that free form? Well, velocity tracking is kind of a little bit of an art. It changes all the time. If you're not to get into kind of agile principles right now, but to understand velocity tracking, you need to understand that team velocity changes all the time because of different reasons. And when that criteria hits, such as somebody rolls off a team, somebody rolls on a team, somebody's contribution and capacity can change. And that directly affects the team's velocity. So you have to look at it and kind of manage it from that perspective. Now you can get the velocity from here by using the analytics. And you'll see here that the average velocity of my team right now is 37. And it's actually tracking that because it looks at my sprint 1 and what we're able to complete versus what's planned for sprint 2. That's not much of an average, to be quite honest. I wouldn't use this number as being gospel in any way. I would at least want 3 sprints or more to determine that. But in this case, I've completed late stories, and I got I got some completed stories. And so it's looking at that. Late ones are ones that we didn't actually complete, but they're actually completed in sprint 2, and so it marks that as being completed because they were planned for 1. Coming back to here in my backlog. Just to kind of force the situation a little bit more, is I'm going to go and change the story points to be like 56. And you'll see here that all of a sudden now I bring into my sprint 4. So that's what I was talking about, how it breaks it up into different chunks. Not that it's any kind of plan in any way. It's just the idea of being able to predict, based upon if the team velocity was 26, in this case, it's telling me it's 37 or 36. I can plug that in. You can see here that it's kind of moving along. It would disperse it a little bit more. So it's all based upon your story points. That's such a very important aspect to understand. If you're not doing it now, and if you're looking to use Azure DevOps, you really want to use forecasting, some level of story point assignment is going to be so important. I mean, even if you don't do it as a team, do it as some type of constant measure. Even if it's a single person or 2 people, just to make sure that the progress of velocity is understood. All right, and then lastly, let's jump into the test plans. And with the test plans, they're broken up into the organization is that you have a test plan which is broken up by test cases. There's still a concept of test suites. For those that remember, Microsoft Test Center, the concept is still the same. And with regard to the organization. From there, you set up your test cases and you have execute and you'll be able to chart out. We're going to come back to these in a second. There's the progress report, which I told you, remember, I showed you my slide. I said, remember that, take a mental picture of that because that was actually much more substantive than what I'm showing here. But you'll see here that it kind of shows you what's happening, the ones that have been passed, the ones that haven't been run yet. Again, understanding the coverage of what your QA team is actually being able to test and what kind of coverage your application is getting. I'm going to jump into configuration, which is the ability to be able to set up different configurations. In this case, I got to do cross-browser testing with Chrome and Firefox using Windows 10. That's going to be an important aspect I'm going to show in a second. And then finally, the runs. And the runs, this is where you get automated testing involved, where you see here I'm manual, but I'm also keeping track of all my unit test runs. And that's what you're seeing here. So, there's some level of showing the results of your unit test if something failed or passed, and be able to dig into some of that. So like I could double click into here and it'll start to show me some of the outcomes. Again, it's all about data and understanding where you are with your process and what kind of quality you're putting out there. So going back to my test plans, I'm going to go ahead and show you what these look like. So these are work items, just like any other work item, and they're set up of test steps. The first aspect of good practice is that there's this concept of shared steps, which is really cool. It's the idea that you're able to bring in a reusable set of steps that all test cases can use. In this case, I have the idea of being able to sign in a user. The user will enter a username of some variable, and this is called a parameter. I'll show you how those work. And then the concept of a password, and then of course the web address that they're going to enter. I don't need to write this all the time, right? When we manually do this as QA analysts, you find yourself doing this all the time when you do like in a Word document or Excel, where you're constantly repeating the same steps over and over again. You might have some neat techniques that you might use to do such techniques as shared steps, but for the most part, it's pretty repetitive when you're doing it manually. But if you can really organize yourself and using shared steps, it provides a lot of power to be able to quickly generate these test cases. From there, I have something very specific called browser redirects to profile details, and this is for this guy right here. That's where I'm at. I just want to be able to view it. And then you'll see here that parameter values. So if you remember in my user sign-in, I had two parameters. I had the username and I had the password. So when I come back here, there they are, username and password. And I can put as many as I want in here. So I've basically John Doe, and I'm going to put in John J. Smith and the password of 456. And that just indicates to me that, without creating a whole new test case, just because I added a new username and password, I don't have to create a whole new test case here. I'm just creating an iteration. I'm going to show you that, an iteration of a test case. I'm going to click save and close. And then also what I'm going to do is I'm going to do my assign the configuration. Right now I'm under Chrome, so I'm only expected to test Chrome, but if I click Firefox, that's going to force me to test that as well. And if you notice, nothing's changing right now. I'm just kind of like, I'm in this define stage because really I'm defining my test cases. All right, so let's just go back one more time just to review my test case. Test case is made up of shared steps and parameters. They're made up of actions and expected results. All of this is freeform. Let's see, browser redirect to profile details. I could put in something here like user closes browser. The expected result that the browser should close. All right. I could even put attachments here. So if we already have like, I don't know, if you have some wireframes or mock-ups that let's say you had a UX team that came in and was able to put this stuff together. For this particular step, you can put an attachment here, so there's some frame of context. So again, giving you all the information you need in order to be able to execute this effectively. I'm going to click save, and now I'm going to go to execute. Now, this is where the magic kind of happens. You have a test case, and you'll see here that there's two things that occurred. Notice here I have duplicates. That's not a bug in Azure DevOps. That's because if you look here, it's a little hard to see, but you'll notice that I have a Firefox version and a Chrome version. So the idea is, again, it's for me to execute this suite successfully in 100% coverage. I'm expected to do both at some point. Maybe I do a Chrome first and then do the Firefox second, whatever the case may be. I'm going to go ahead but I'm going to run this one test case and show you what that looks like. So I'm going to do it run for a web application. Just don't confuse this. This is just, all this means that you're going to be running the test in the web app of Azure DevOps. If you're using the client version, you would run it from desktop application, which you could, if you don't have it, it'll force you to download it. You can use a fat client, or you can use the web version. I'm going to use the web version for the purpose of the demo. And when you see here, it comes up with this window. First things that you'll see here, that it has all my steps. including the shared steps that you couldn't see in your test case. It just puts it all through here. And then it's going to have, and now pretty much what it's doing is asking me to manually go through it. So I'm going to go pass, 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 you know, and I'll say fail, right? And I could put a comment in here because the expected result was user sees details related to their sign-in. You know, let's say user sees some other or somebody else's. That'd be bad, huh? All right, but I'm not done yet, right? Because I got another iteration here. So I'm going to click next. So now I have another test case to run. Why? Because I have another version here. Before it was Jane Doe using a password of 123, and now I'm using John Smith with a password of 456. So now I'm going to run this test. All right, I'm going to say, well, oh, okay, this is good. Profile details came up as normal for John Smith. Not sure why, but it did. And he was able to close his browser and proceed. All right, but this one failed. So then what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create a bug. And you'll see here that now it creates a bug in Azure DevOps with all the steps to reproduce. I didn't have to write a thing because my test case was set up with the steps to you know, where I went through and went through every step of the way to get to the point of failure. And then you see here, my expected result is here. And then my comments was my actual result. All right, so pretty simple. And then from there, I would go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and save it. My title, well, I guess I got to give it a title. I'll say, you know, user is different profile than what was expected. Right, and now my bug is created, and I have my failure here. All right. From there, I guess I shouldn't have closed too quick because what I really need to do is fail this test. It would have done that for me if I would have clicked save and close. My fault. And then when I come here and go to my progress report, you'll see that it's going to take a little bit. But anyway, it would show up as being a failure, and that would show up in here under this one here. Hasn't updated yet. But that's the idea is, you know, you'd be able to come back, be able to pretty much go through your coverage, be able to understand your quality of your test cases, what has been ran, you know, where they kind of are, and more importantly, again, associated to the requirements. All right, from there, you know, this concludes my demo. So there's a couple of things. Let me go back to saving. Yeah. There we go. Go back to share my screen. So, you know, if you're looking to adopt DevOps, you know, what we suggest is get started with a small initiative. You can see there's a lot here. And a lot of you are faced with, you know, working on the processes that have been in place for so long. And, you know, to come in and be a change agent because you like the tool, you think it's really great. It has a great, you know, integration with regard to traceability and pipelines and, you know, and the code repository, which you haven't seen yet, that's tomorrow. But, you know, you want to get started start small. Any kind of forward motion of being able to adopt the latest technology is a great thing. And then more importantly, have your eye on be able to show value back to the business. Why you're trying to do this, you know, and some of that is going to come through some of the reporting, you know, so Ben's going to talk about like application insights tomorrow. And, you know, so when you talk about, you know, or try to convey to the business about, you know, how you're doing things faster, how you're getting more services out there, how you're able to probably cut some costs by being able to automate your releases at a much faster rate with less amount of people. So instead of doing on a Friday night or Saturday night, having a 4-hour deployment, which we've all been there, you now can use Azure DevOps to mitigate that amount of deployment, maybe even fully automate it, eliminate it, and just be able to press a button and be able to release your application out into your environment. And more importantly, which I'm sure you're all here, is to be able to embrace change. Well, you're all here to do that. That's why you want to learn about Azure DevOps. So I don't think that's a question. But more importantly, your organization has to embrace it. So just keep that in mind when you're trying to sell them about being able to bring in like a DevOps process more so. Why you want to use this new tool. And then, like I said before, be able to prove that you're doing things much more faster, much more efficiently. That's the key to this whole thing. But if you're not doing that, if you're just kind of going through the motions, being able to use this tool to put your code into a new tool set, that it's not TFS, not Subversion, whatever else you're using out there, then you're really just going through the same old motions. So I highly recommend and encourage that using this tool set should bring on some more improved and more better changes going into this new decade. So thanks for listening, everybody. Right now, what I'm going to do is take a few moments of your time. Ryan, I'll have you take it over from here. He's just going to talk to you about some of the offerings we do around DevOps. Now we're doing, and just to kind of get you familiar with what we're doing out there. And then tomorrow, Ben will take over from here. He's going to go through the Azure pipelines. He's going to go through the kind of code repositories, go through more about that traceability, and really get some deep dive into the cool aspects of what you can do today with this great tool set. Take it away, Ryan.
Awesome. Thanks, Gerard. Great presentation. And yeah, I'll just share out my screen here quickly. So just wanted to give you guys an idea of, since you're attending this workshop, kind of, outside of these sort of to the public workshops, things that we're doing with customers and also the different things we could help with. So, obviously right now with things shifting to a work from home environment, the idea of collaboration has become more and more of a very high importance sort of item. And we're actually been doing a lot of different engagements around things like Azure DevOps, Microsoft Teams, et cetera, and really helping development teams really shift and adapt to the work from home sort of shift that's going on. So here is like one of the one pagers that we have together. It's kind of like a menu of our different DevOps service offerings. So at the top, you kind of see here what we could help with, and a lot of it is what Ben and Gerard are kind of going to go through both in today's session that you heard, and then a little bit more in depth in tomorrow's session. So we're working with a lot of different customers actually remotely now to kind of help ramp up some of their different app dev teams on DevOps. There's a couple customers we're working with where some groups are further along in DevOps than others, and we're kind of seeing those different pain points, and we could help really on any step of the way with the DevOps process, whether you need help with build pipelines or testing or any of the laundry list of things you see there. And the way we kind of approach it is through our offerings. So we have a couple different types of offerings, and some of them we mix and match. So there's some customers right now that we're doing kind of like a hybrid of an assessment and POC type offer for, and then there's within that same company, actually there's other groups that aren't as mature, so we kind of paired the assessment with a hands-on training type offering. So really any way you want to mix and match it, we're really able to help, and we obviously understand that certain groups, depending on the size of the organization, may be further along with certain tool sets than others. So that's kind of why we break out our offerings into these different subcategories. And then obviously when we're talking with you, we try and truly understand where you are now, where your specific group is trying to head, and then position a sort of engagement there. So I will encourage you definitely to reach out to Gerard, reach out to myself. Microsoft's new fiscal year is opening beginning of July, so they're kind of closing out the year. But a lot of pre-funding has opened towards engagements like this. We've been able to leverage that with a lot of customers to kind of get the wheels moving and get their feet under them, especially with what's going on with COVID. So I would definitely encourage you to reach out if you have any questions for Gerard or myself. or anyone else at Talon, and we could certainly have at least an initial conversation to discuss your specific situation and how we may be able to help out on that end. So with that, I'll kind of put it to a close. Gerard, if you want to hop back on.
Yeah,
You have
thanks,
any other
Ryan.
commentary? Yep.
No, not specifically. Just want to thank everybody for joining. Great session. Hope you got learned a lot about kind of the work item tracking capability of being able to